Elijah too. Elijah went to heaven, and, well, no, his body was just like Enoch. They both experienced physical death on their way there. And then their physical body went down to the Abraham's bosom, and then their spirit went up to the heavens, like God said. God took them up. But the reality is, this is different. And then they were actually reconstituted back in paradise with their soul and spirit down there. And then that's where they are. Well, they were. And then Jesus goes down to post-resurrection or post-crucifixion. He goes down to Hades. And Ephesians, we saw it last week, Ephesians 4, 8, and 9. He descended before he ascended. He took captivity captive. This is captivity captive right here. He took, I go on the board, didn't I? Or did I? No, I didn't do that. Oh, that was last week I did that on the board. But he took captivity captive of the fiery place, which is called prison. And 1 Peter 3, verse 18 and 20, he preached to the spirits in prison. He went down to the Hades fiery part and told them, hey, by the way, those who believed in the covenant but lived disobediently, I told you the recompense was real. And they're like, what? What part did you not understand about? Why would I do Gerizim and Ebal if I wasn't telling you that my people are accountable to either a blessing or a curse? Well, guess what? You're living the curse right now. Oh, but by the way, this is just the Olithros version. What you mean? This is just the initial consequence, the initial destruction. There's an Apolea destruction still out ahead. What? Yeah. But in between Olithros and Apolea, guess what? I love you so much. Stay of execution. Everybody gets relief from this pain, and they get to go to the heavens, but in a holding place. Captivity is held captive. And they're like, okay, good news, bad news. I like the fact we're going to be freed from the torment. That part's good. The part that we're going to get still another destruction ahead doesn't sound good. I don't like that. But hey, you know what? Thanks for the reprieve. But that's what he's telling them. They're like, I mean, that's what he's telling them. People go, he's preaching to people in hell saying, should have believed in me. Why would he do that? Why would he just point the finger? Ha 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 ha. Here's the irony of this. People who teach God is love are the ones that don't know what to do with that versing. And 1 Peter 3, 18 and 20, when he preaches to spirits in prison, they actually say he's talking to folks in hell. About what? Since they can't change their reality, according to churchianity, how is that not mocking them? How is that not condescending? How is that not ugly? Isn't that ironic? I'm being charged with telling you that God is a meanie and a hateful God. No. I'm saying he's a loving God, and that's why bad things may happen in accountability, but there's a restorative love out ahead, and they don't see that. But they're teaching that God's love while he's mocking people in hell. What? Does that make sense to you? Doesn't to me. Because what's he preaching to them? Why even preach? If you're in hell, which is what they teach, 1 Peter 3:19 says, which is wrong, then how do you explain what he's preaching then? You know, they teach, he's like, oh, by the way, you know, no, he's not. He's telling them that covenant reality that I told you about, and I warned you about obedience and not. I told you about Gerizim and Ebal. I told you, and I told you, and I told you, and I told you, and I showed you through examples. The ground opened up, the fire came down. How many more examples I got to give you? Even the man who touched the Ark of the Covenant, I dropped him dead Fred. Didn't matter what his intentions were. There was rules you got to follow. You knew this. I gave you example after example of my power, of my love, of my restoration, of the rules, and you just didn't care. And here you are because of that. But you know what? I'm going to give you a stay of execution from the pain. I'm going to take captivity captive. Those in Abraham's bosom, in paradise, were given gifts to men. So now Hades is empty. But the first compartment was taken up. I'm going to take a little stop here. So go over to 2 Corinthians in chapter 12. 2 Corinthians in chapter 12. And Paul was stoned outside of Lystra, and he was left for dead. As far as he knew, he was dead because he was unconscious. And that's why he says, I knew a man out of the body, in the body I don't know. Because he was stoned outside. Going back to the book of Acts study we did. If you want to go back and listen to that, it's a long study. But get to the part about Lystra right around chapters 15 to 16. And you'll remember that he was stoned and left for dead. And by the way, the moxie of this guy, he goes back into that city. To me, I wouldn't go back ever again. If you hated me so much, you stoned me and knocked me out cold, guess what? I love you, I forgive you, and I'm out. I'm not going back. He goes, I'm going back. He's crazy. He went back. I mean, people forget that part of the story. That's insane to me. I'm not doing that. He goes, oh, God loves you this much, and I love you. Well, I'm not there yet, Paul. You got, Lord, help me. That's crazy. Going right back into the...
like he experienced some of what happened to Stephen.
Yeah, oh, it's great, yeah. Yeah. So he says in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, just going to read a couple verses here, 1 through 4. 2 Corinthians 12, 1 to 4. Is it necessary to boast? Is it not profitable indeed? 2 Corinthians 12, verse 1. But I will come even to visions and revelations of the Lord, or revelation of the Lord. It's not plural. Revelation of the Lord. I know a man in Christ who about 14 years since, whether with a body I know not, or without a body I know not, God knows. Such a one suddenly conveyed away to the third heaven. Why does he say that? Because he doesn't know what kind of body. He does not recognize whether it's his physical body or soulical body that he was in. It was his soulical body, which is another indication that they look the same, which is why when Jesus rose from the dead, he said, see, put your hands in my holes in my hands and my side. I have not a ghost or a phantom. I am risen from the dead, but I have flesh and bone, no blood. So, wait a second. So, the physical body has flesh, blood, and bone, but looks just like the soulical body, which is flesh and bone. Yes! Yes! Jesus said so. And here Paul says it like, I can't tell. And I'm not checking my blood to see if I have blood in me. I don't feel any different. I don't look any different. I don't know. That's why he's saying that. They look the same. Spiritual body, same thing. You just drop the bone. Now it's just flesh. Spirit body has flesh. Soulical body has flesh and bone. Physical body has flesh, blood, and bone. But they look the same. The difference is the spiritual body is the only one that begins to change and morph when God takes the flesh away and you partake of the divine nature. Like Jesus said at Mount Transfiguration. Well then, okay, now I can tell that that's different. When you get to glorified, that's when you go, okay, yeah, about that Shekinah glory thing. Yeah, I can tell that. So in verse 3, and I know this, it says, I know not a body, only God knows, such a one, verse 2, the latter part, such a one suddenly conveyed away to the third heaven. Speaking of the heavens where the birds fly, the heaven where space, planetary, celestial stars, and then heaven itself, the mobile city of God, the heavenly Jerusalem, the apex, where his throne is, as Ezekiel talks about in chapter 1 and chapter 8. From a horizontal, chapter 1, Ezekiel is the vertical view, chapter 8, the horizontal view of the throne room. It's pretty awesome. Go back and read that, gives you some chills. 2 Corinthians 12:3, and I know this very man, whether with a body or without a body, I know not. Says it again, God knows, emphasizing to you, this is a drop-dead experience. Literally, he's not understanding. That's how beyond comprehension it is. When he's still, remember, if he was not in the sinful body, he would have known. He's in a sinful body. He's not dead yet, so he can't tell. He's in his conscious. He's out cold, but he's in his soulical form of his sinful body. And he says that he was suddenly conveyed away into the paradise, and heard indescribable things spoken, which is not possible for a man to relate. He was conveyed to paradise, he says in 2 Corinthians 12:4, because Jesus took the whole bad boy up, it says in Ephesians chapter 4, 8, and 9. He took it up there. So that's what happened. Took the whole compartment up. So right now, Hades, there's no more upper compartment. It's just a lower compartment. That's the fiery pit known as prison. And who's there? No one. But wait a minute. When you die and don't know Jesus, you're supposed to go in flames. My pastor said so. Oh, I'm sorry, they're wrong. Sorry. They're wrong. It's empty. And all judgment is reserved to the Son in Matthew 28. And all judgment will be given unto him, and he will judge. Those in Christ will be judged at the bema seat of Christ. After the 1,000-year reign of Christ, those on the earth and under the earth will be judged at the great white throne. So that means Hades, Gehenna. And then those in the heavens who entered and didn't inherit will get vetted through an inspection process between the Ariston and the Dietnon. Not a judgment, a vetting process of an inspection, it's called. Inspection, just like in the Paschal Lamb, they inspected the sheep. Not a judgment, an inspection. What did you inspect? For spots and blemishes. That sounds real familiar, doesn't it? About the blameless and spotless garment of the bride. What a coincidence. It's an inspection that's being done to be found worthy to enter in the Dietnon. Not a judgment. You've already been judged and you go to the heavens. It's an inspection period, and the door is shut or it's open to you on that accord. So the great white throne is only for those on the earth and under the earth. It has nothing to do with people that are pagan. It's only to do with people of covenant and in testament. That's it. All right? The only other group that's in that great white throne is people in the sea of glass. And I'll go into that in just a minute. Yes?
Vicky said, can you run through those bodies again, please? Did you say the spiritual body is flesh? I would think that is blood. Todd said flesh and bone, but no blood.
So the spirit is flesh only. You get that from Jude and the latter verses when he says, you can read it on your own context for verses 5 to 7. He says the angels went after heterox, or we get the word different or strange flesh than their own, which means they had flesh. That's how you know spiritual bodies have flesh. That's in Jude 5 through 7. You can read the word left side of your margin, heterox, or strange, different from. We get the word heterosexual from that. Okay? So again, it's different from. So the spiritual bodies have flesh. Soulical bodies have flesh and bone. And the physical bodies have flesh, blood, and bone. There's a difference. Of the physical body, there's two different kinds of those. Those with flesh, blood, and bone without sin, Jesus. And those with sin, us, right? So those of flesh and blood and bone are types of earthy ones. Jesus was on the earth, was he not? But he didn't stay here. Right? Yes.
And Vicky said, where is the sin located then?
There is no sin in the spiritual. Oh, I don't know what you mean by the sin, but there's no sin in the spiritual body or soulical body. But remember, when your soulical body is taken out of your sinful body, and in Paul's case, he was still alive, but just comatose. His body's still living, so his soulical body is not fully transformed yet into its final state of flesh and bone. Apart from there's an attachment to the physical body that's still of sin, and so he has that sin still attached. That's why he's not sure. He's not clear. But if he was actually dead and his body of sin and death was put to death, then his soulical body would be made free from that. That's different. But that's not what was going on. That's why he can't tell. His mind is veiled because he's in a sinful physical body that's laid. He doesn't know if it's dead or, in this case, comatose. He doesn't understand. He's out cold. He's unconscious. But the fact that he was being veiled should have given him a clue. That's why you can tell he thinks that. That's why he says, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that this is real, but I think I'm not dead, but I don't know. Because you can't put anything past God. He doesn't know. He doesn't want to presume upon God. It shows you, again, another attitude of Paul's heart. He's not presumptuous. He wants to make sure we're clear on this. I don't know for sure. I don't want to presume upon God that I'm seeing this apart from being physically dead or just unconscious. I don't know. Yes?
Vicky said, because I thought sin was in the flesh.
Oh.
Life is in the blood.
No, good point. Yep. So no, there's no sin in the flesh. The life is in the blood. You can have flesh without blood, put it that way. The sin's in the blood. Anything with blood dies, sinful or not. Anything with blood, look at Jesus. He's sinless. He died. Anything with blood dies. Because the wages of sin is death when you have sin in your blood. The only person that walked this earth with blood with no sin was Jesus, and Yeshua. He gave himself as a sacrifice for sin. He became our paschal lamb and took on sin, and that's why he died. He died sinless, but becoming our sin sacrifice, taking the sin on himself. So that's why he died, right? For our sacrifice. He became our propitiation as our propitiator. He was both, right? But yeah, so flesh can be without blood. Because remember, that's how you're moving up the line. You go flesh, blood, and bone, physical body. Soulical body, flesh and bone, no blood. So the blood's already gone. Once you get the soulical, there's no more blood. You're gone. You're gone. Soulical body is flesh and bone. Flesh and bone. So flesh and bone, soulical body are those that you can, when you have no blood, then there's no sin. You're done with that. But you can be tempted to sin because of the fact that you're not in that eternal state yet, which is what happened in the Garden of Eden, which also happened in the heavens, as we saw before. Angels had no blood, and they fell into sin. So to your point, you have no sin in you when you have flesh, but sin can come upon you in the flesh. Does that make sense? I hope you understand that. There's no sin in you. It can come upon you and deceive you, even when you have no blood, which is like crazy scary to think about that. Yes?
First of all, Vicki said, okay, thank you, but the soul is contained in the body, right?
The
and
soul-
Lainey said, where does the blood go from the solical body?
So the solical body, okay. So the solical body, imagine the soul is they're using medical terms. They said the life's in the blood, and you're thinking their blood equals soul. Reverse that, engineer that thought process. Oxygen is being used in the blood to carry it to the body, right? The bloodstream carries oxygen to our blood cells, to all of our body, right? So the oxygen in the blood is our soul. And that's why our breath, our life breath, is our soul. But the oxygen and the blood are inseparable. You can't take oxygen out of the blood or else you die. The blood's only keeping you alive because oxygen's in the bad boy, right? You can't just take oxygen. I'm not a medical person or a science person, but I don't know how you can even do that. Is that even possible? I don't know. I don't know. But I know if you did do that, then you're not alive. You can't take oxygen out of your blood and go, they're still alive. How? How does that work, right? You can't do that. But the oxygen in the blood is the soul, if you will, symbolism, and the blood is the physical body mechanism. Yes?
Vicki said, so if Enoch's spirit went to God, soul to Hades, where did his body go?
Okay, so that's a good question. So Enoch and Elijah both, what I'm saying to you is that when they ascended upwards, Enoch earlier just was caught up, Elijah later on was in the chariot of fire, that they were both, if you will, just, hate to say it this way, but they just kind of their bodies met death. So they were come to naught. Their bodies just were separated at that point, the heavens beyond perception. We can't see it. So Elisha was looking up at Elijah, didn't see nothing. And those who were alive to see Enoch didn't mention they were looking up, but let's just say they were. They didn't see it. So nobody saw it, but we know that the body of sin and death cannot go to heaven. There's no sin allowed there. So by the nature of the facts, then something happened in between. So therefore, I'm saying that their bodies were disposed of in the sense of they met death, because the wages of sin is death. They did die. Their bodies died, but an unnatural death. So think of it this way. Moses, it said, his eyes were not dimming, his teeth were not fading, but yet God said, it's time to go. Moses is like, what do you mean time to go? And God finishes writing the book, by the way, which is insane in Deuteronomy. People always go, who finished the book? If Moses died, there's a record of him dying. He obviously didn't finish the thing, right? Because Joshua finished it. Well, yeah, okay. But the reality is that God told him, you're not physically dying. I'm just telling you, time's up. What? Imagine hearing those words from God. Everything's working fine. Waterworks is good. Electrical power's on to your brain. Everything's working good. God goes, I know, but you're 120 and it's time to go. What do you mean time to go? Well, you're done. What? I'm telling you you're done. Like, I don't feel like I'm done. Well, you are. And God just takes them. Like, what's that all about, right? So that's a time and place where God legitimately showed you in life a sinner can be taken out before natural causes just because God just says it's time. So same with Enoch and Elijah. If God just said it's time to separate their body from their soul and spirit, then it was time. And on Moses' case, it was time on the earth, and no one knows he was buried. That was a private interaction. We don't know where he's buried. Remember, Satan tried to contend for his body. Michael Archangel was, nope, that's between you and Jesus. And I ain't messing with that. And so here you have an unknown place where he was buried, speaking to an unknown time, an unknown way in which God separated Moses from his body and soul and spirit, right? Before it was naturally being done. God supernaturally did that. Like, it wasn't a natural cause. It was God cause. So it's the same with Enoch and Elijah. That's my point. That God supernaturally has already shown us in Moses, he can and will and does separate spirit and soul from body, even though it's not a natural death. It's still a death. So if you don't think Enoch or Elijah experienced a physical death, then you're saying Moses didn't either? Because they can't find his body. No one could testify he wasn't there anymore. Think about it. Think about it. Only because it was recorded. Yeah, but there's no evidence other than the record of it. There's nobody who saw it happen. There's nobody who saw where he was buried. We don't know. But yet everybody accepts that he's dead. He died. Well, Enoch and Elijah died too, but just not naturally. They all three died supernaturally. They all three died unnatural to the consequences of sin and death. They died because of sin and death, but they died of a supernatural intervention of God. They experienced death differently, I should say. They experienced death differently. All three of those people did. Moses on earth, separated from soul and spirit before his time was come. Elijah and Enoch, they did that on the way to the heavens before their time has come. It's that simple. That's easy I can say it to you. Yeah.
Just think about, bless the Lord, all my soul, the soul and the oxygen. When you breathe out carbon dioxide, but there's oxygen there, and you wonder what happens with the carbon and the carbon dioxide when you bless the Lord.
Oh, wow. That's a good point. I don't know. But I know that they say argon is the only thing in our environment that is not, like oxygen and carbon dioxide are always more that's coming out of plants than us. So there's always more of that. But argon is always the same, which always made me go, wait a second. So when it says in him we live and breathe and have our being, I wonder if the argon that Jesus breathed in, that some of it is circling the planet, and only those who are walking in faith with him get to breathe in some of those particles of the same air that he breathed in. Can you imagine that? That just kind of blows my mind. That's because it's new oxygen, new carbon dioxide, but it's the same old argon. So eventually, at some place in time, somebody on this planet has breathed in the same particles of air that Jesus did, that Yeshua did. It's kind of fascinating to think of it. It's good chill to think about it. Yes?
First of all, Pam said the blood has a voice, right? The blood cried out
Yes.
from the ground.
Yes.
So the blood goes into the ground and the body is buried.
Yeah.
And Lainey said, what type of Moses is great to describe Elijah and Enoch? Vicky said, so when they return to earth in Revelation, they are just soul, spirit, or just spirit?
They're reconstituted. They're all three. Moses and Elijah come back. When Moses and Elijah come back, their spirit, soul, and body reconstitutes on the earth, and they are preaching and teaching. But they're killed, if you remember, obviously, and they raise up 3 days later. But yeah, Pam's point about the blood crying out speaks to the oxygen, which represents the soul within the blood, who cries out. Because obviously, when the blood cries out and the blood spilled on the earth, it's speaking to the fact that going back to your point about that, it speaks to when the golden bowl is broken, the silver cord is loosed, and the cistern and fountain ceases. When that's the final separation before a life goes from alive on this earth to death, right? The final separation is blood being lost, easing out of your vein. Before the blood stops pumping, the soul leaves it though, the oxygen. So the blood cries out as a representation of, I'm in my last stage of going from life to death. That's what it's speaking to, is that the soul, when the soul separates from the body, it's over. You're going to die. And at that point, there's the cry of the blood on the earth, because now the blood's been spilled out. The oxygen from the blood, the soul symbolized in that, has been taken. The silver cord's been loosed, and now the blood just flows out. And that's when the blood cries out, because now the life it's beyond being redeemed at that. I mean, it's not beyond being sustained at that point. The life has now come to an end. So spirit, golden bowl's broken, the silver cord's loose. I mean, the oxygen leaves the blood. The blood then just oozes out, and the blood cries out to say, this life has now come to an end at this juncture, this one chapter, right? It's not over. This chapter's come to an end. It's a great point about the blood crying out, because it does say it about Abel and about the prophets. Yes?
Lainey said, what is the type of Enoch, since Moses and Elijah are two witnesses?
Yeah, Enoch that's a good point. So Enoch is a type of those who are the soon medikoi folks who are taken up, who experience similar, because they're alive on the earth in Revelation 14, and they meet them out on the Mount Zion, and they're taken up. But when did they die? They didn't, right? So how did they go to a meeting in the air? Unless they die, just like Enoch did. They experienced a physical separation of death, and just like Enoch did. So Enoch's a type of the soon medikoi who go up in Revelation 14. If that helps to answer your question. And Moses and Elijah, who die twice, are typifying of people who say, there's no way you in Christ can die twice. While those who are all dead and appear at the Bema seat will experience death at some point. To go to the Bema seat, you have to have died, right? And so then you could experience another death at the Great White Throne in the lake of fire. And there's your priest. So how's that possible? Second death. Moses and Elijah prove it's possible. So they died twice. I'm just saying. They died twice. They're going to die twice. They haven't yet, but they will. So that's how that works. So that makes sense for you. So anyway, we're over time. I was going to finish some other things, but it's okay. We got some different things that it speaks to another time. We'll get together again. So let's close in prayer and we'll go. Yes.
Laney said, what did Enoch do to be a type of the soon Medicoi?
In Jude, he did the very same thing that the soon Medicoi are going to be doing. It says that Enoch preached about the coming of the Lord. He taught them in Jude, if you remember. Enoch's in Jude.
Okay.
Enoch is in Jude, and I forget the actual.
And she said yes.
Yep, but he's in Jude, and the actual, where is it at? In verse 14 into verse 15. So Enoch was a preacher of the Lord to come, and to do his judgments, and to basically obey and respect him, which is basically what the soon Medicoi are, that voice crying out amongst the myriads who are against them in the majority. He's the minority voice, just like the 144,000 soon Medicoi will be the voice of the minority. So let's close and pray. We'll continue this study ongoing. And I wanted to just put some more legwork out there for what we're going to be looking at. I hope this has helped to set some groundwork and some framework of thought about who is in view and why, and not just normal traditions of men. So let's close and pray. Father, thank you for this time we've had together. We ask that you continue to bless us, help us, guide us, direct us, and encourage us, convict us of things that we need to have. I confess my own personal sins of my frustrations, my anger, my lack of trusting in you, to just accept what is and to see your hand in it. And even though I know this to be true, I teach it to be true, I understand it to be true, doesn't mean it's easy to do. And I ask that you continue to forgive me, confess that I have not lived up to what I know is right, and just help to see the truth in what you're doing, see your hand and why you're doing it, to have pliability as we are the potter. You are the potter, we are the clay in your potter's hands. We ask that you continue to help to break us, reforge us, reshape us. Help as you reshape me and create me a new heart, oh God, and search every wicked way within me and root it out. And help me to be at peace with you, given all the stress, anxieties, and pains and anguishes, and help me be like Lazarus, just crouching over and longing for just crumbs of your love, crumbs of your truth, of your insight, of just the little things. Take it all as a treasure and not for granted. All that you always have done, are doing, will continue to do as our loving, big-breasted, compassionate, giving, restorative, defending, protecting God. We thank you for being our gentle shepherd. We ask all these things in Jesus, Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. I went over way long. I just realized what time it was. I was looking